They fired him publicly and unjustly. So he ended their business quietly. The rain had started before sunrise and never stopped. Cold water streaked across the glass walls of the downtown office tower while employees hurried through revolving doors with paper cups, umbrellas, backpacks, and sleepy expressions. Traffic lights reflected against soaked pavement like melted paint. Car horns echoed between buildings. Steam drifted from subway grates. The city looked exhausted before the day had even begun. Inside the 32nd floor of Blackridge Commerce Solutions, everything smelled like expensive coffee, printer toner, polished marble, and stress. Rows of glowing monitors lit the open office space in pale blue light. Phones rang nonstop. Keyboards clattered rapidly. Managers moved through aisles with tablets pressed against their chests while assistants rushed behind them, carrying folders and documents. Near the far end of the floor, beside the large windows overlooking the river, sat Adrian Cole. Quiet, focused, predictable. The kind of employee nobody notices until everything stops working. His dark navy shirt sleeves were rolled neatly to his elbows. His tie hung slightly loose from another sleepless night. Faint exhaustion sat beneath his eyes, but his posture remained straight as he reviewed financial reports across multiple screens. Every spreadsheet was balanced. Every logistics chain optimized. Every supplier issue resolved before upper management even realized there was a problem. For almost 8 years, Adrian had quietly become the invisible backbone of Blackridge. And nobody appreciated it. Not really. The executives received awards. Department heads received bonuses. Marketing teams received applause during company meetings. Meanwhile, Adrian stayed late fixing disasters other people created. Every single week, a loud burst of laughter erupted near the conference rooms. Trevor Gaines emerged with 2 senior executives beside him, speaking confidently while adjusting his designer watch. His expensive charcoal suit looked freshly tailored. His smile was polished, artificial, practiced. Trevor was the company's vice president of operations. Officially, unofficially, he was a parasite dressed like success. He never built anything himself. He attached himself to the work of smarter people and presented it as his own. Everyone knew it. Nobody challenged it because Trevor had mastered corporate politics better than anyone in the building. As he passed Adrian's desk, he stopped briefly. His eyes lowered toward the reports displayed across Adrian's monitor. Well, Trevor said smugly, looks like someone actually decided to work today. Several nearby employees laughed nervously. Adrian barely looked up. The West Coast supplier issue is resolved, he said calmly. I sent the revised transportation projections to your email an hour ago. Trevor's smile tightened for half a second. Then he recovered quickly. Good, he replied. Maybe now you can finally stop acting like the company would collapse without you. He walked away before Adrian could answer. The laughter faded awkwardly behind him. Across the aisle, Mia leaned over her cubicle wall with concern in her eyes. You okay? Adrian nodded without emotion. Same circus. Different day. Mia sighed. She had joined Blackridge 2 years earlier and quickly became one of the few people Adrian genuinely trusted. Sharp-minded, observant, honest. She noticed things others ignored. Like how Trevor constantly took credit for Adrian's operational systems. Like how senior leadership conveniently forgot whose ideas generated millions in savings. Like how Adrian had slowly become isolated from promotions despite outperforming almost everyone in the company. You should have left this place years ago, she whispered. Adrian stared through the rain-soaked windows toward the gray skyline. Maybe, but he didn't leave. Because Blackridge wasn't just a job to him. It was survival. After his father died years earlier, Adrian became responsible for supporting both his younger brother and his mother through endless medical bills. Stability mattered more than pride, more than recognition, more than happiness. So he endured, day after day, year after year, until the morning everything changed. It happened just after lunch. Employees were suddenly called into the main conference hall through a company-wide notification marked mandatory attendance. People exchanged confused glances while gathering laptops and coffee cups. Conversations buzzed through the corridors as everyone filtered into the massive glass-walled room overlooking the city. At the front stood the executive team. Trevor, human resources, legal advisors, and CEO Warren Vale himself. Warren was nearing 60, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, permanently expressionless. The kind of man who treated human beings like replaceable machine parts. Adrian immediately sensed something was wrong. Very wrong. Trevor avoided eye contact completely. The room settled into silence. Warren adjusted his cufflinks before speaking. As many of you know, he began coldly. Blackridge prides itself on integrity, accountability, and trust. Adrian felt Mia glance toward him uneasily. We recently uncovered severe financial irregularities connected to our operations division. Whispers spread instantly. Trevor lowered his head dramatically like a disappointed leader forced into an unpleasant responsibility. Adrian's stomach tightened. Warren continued. After a thorough internal investigation, evidence indicates deliberate manipulation of supplier contracts and unauthorized fund reallocations. A giant screen behind them suddenly lit up. Adrian froze. His name appeared across the presentation. Adrian Cole. Gasps erupted across the room. Mia immediately stood halfway from her chair. What? Adrian stared at the screen in disbelief while slide after slide displayed altered financial documents, transaction summaries, and internal emails apparently connected to him. His pulse pounded violently. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. These actions, Warren said firmly, have caused substantial financial exposure and reputational damage to this company. Adrian finally stood. There's been a mistake. Trevor slowly shook his head with theatrical disappointment. We gave you opportunities to explain privately, Trevor said. You denied everything. Adrian looked directly at him and suddenly understood. Every late-night file request, every strange access authorization, every missing audit trail over the previous months. Trevor, he had done this. You framed me. The room exploded with murmurs. Trevor's face hardened instantly. Be careful, Adrian. No, Adrian snapped louder now. You used my system credentials. Enough, Warren barked. Security personnel entered through the rear doors. Humiliation spread across Adrian's body like acid beneath his skin. Hundreds of eyes stared at him. Some shocked, some fearful, some secretly entertained. Mia tried speaking again. This doesn't make sense. Human resources interrupted immediately. Miss Ramirez, sit down. Adrian looked around the room desperately. 8 years. 8 years of sacrifice. Late nights. Missed holidays. Destroyed relationships. Exhaustion. Loyalty. And not one executive questioned the accusation for even a second. Not one. Warren's voice became ice cold. You are terminated effective immediately. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Then came the final blow. You will also be referred for criminal investigation pending further review. Adrian's chest tightened so sharply it almost stole his breath. Criminal investigation. They weren't just firing him. They were destroying him. Security approached his chair. Employees avoided his eyes as he slowly gathered his belongings. A single framed photograph of his family. A notebook. His coat. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. Nobody defended him. Except Mia. This is wrong, she said firmly. You all know this is wrong. Trevor stared at her with warning in his expression. Sit down. But she didn't. Her jaw tightened while watching Adrian walk toward the exit surrounded by security guards like a criminal. Rain battered the windows behind him. The city outside had become darker now. Harsher. By the time the elevator doors closed, Adrian felt something inside him crack completely. Not sadness. Not fear. Something colder. Something far more dangerous. The elevator descended silently floor after floor while fluorescent lights reflected against the polished metal walls. Adrian stared at his own reflection. Disgraced. Discarded. Erased. But beneath the humiliation, another realization slowly emerged. He knew everything about Blackridge. Everything. Every hidden supplier arrangement. Every illegal cost-cutting maneuver. Every falsified compliance report. Every executive lie buried beneath polished presentations and motivational speeches. Because he built the systems they used. And for the first time in years, Adrian realized something terrifying. Blackridge was not powerful. It was fragile. Very fragile. The moment he stepped outside the building, freezing rain hit his face like needles. Traffic roared through the streets. Pedestrians brushed past him carelessly beneath umbrellas. Digital billboards flashed advertisements overhead, while the massive Blackridge logo glowed proudly across the skyscraper behind him. Adrian stood there for a long moment, drenched, breathing slowly, watching the company he sacrificed his life for continue operating as though he never existed. Then his phone vibrated. Mia. He hesitated before answering. I copied files before they locked your accounts, she whispered immediately. Something's wrong, Adrian. The timestamps were altered. He closed his eyes briefly. Proof. There was proof. You shouldn't have done that. I know. Thunder rolled across the skyline. Mia lowered her voice further. Trevor looked terrified after you left. Adrian opened his eyes again and stared upward toward the towering glass building. For the first time all day, he smiled slightly. Not from happiness. From realization. Fear. Trevor was afraid. That meant Trevor knew Adrian could destroy him. And suddenly the humiliation from earlier transformed into clarity. They thought public humiliation would silence him. Instead, they had just created the worst enemy Blackridge could possibly imagine. Because unlike executives blinded by greed and ego, Adrian understood every weakness hidden beneath the company's perfect image. And he was finally done protecting them. You've stayed this far. So let me ask you this. Do you think you already know how this ends? Drop a like if you have a prediction, then keep watching to find out if you're right. Let's continue. The apartment smelled like rain, stale coffee, and silence. Adrian dropped his soaked coat onto the back of a chair and stood motionless near the kitchen counter while water dripped from his sleeves onto the hardwood floor. The small apartment was dim except for the weak yellow light above the stove and the distant glow of city traffic filtering through partially closed blinds. Outside, sirens echoed somewhere downtown. Inside, everything felt numb. The television remained muted in the corner of the room, flashing headlines and stock updates across the screen. Blackridge Commerce Solutions continued appearing in business segments as one of the fastest-growing logistics firms in the country. Reliable, innovative, trusted. Adrian almost laughed. He loosened his collar slowly and walked toward the narrow hallway mirror. His reflection looked older than it had that morning. His eyes carried the hollow exhaustion of someone who had just watched years of his life collapse in a single hour. His phone buzzed again. Mia. This time she sent files. Dozens of them. Internal audit trails. Email chains. Access logs. System timestamps. Adrian immediately sat at his dining table, opened his laptop, and began reviewing everything carefully while thunder rolled outside the apartment windows. The deeper he looked, the colder his expression became. Trevor had not acted alone. Several authorization records led upward through senior management. Legal had signed off on modified compliance reports months earlier. Finance directors had approved altered supplier payouts hidden beneath manipulated operational losses. It was bigger than revenge. Much bigger. Blackridge had been quietly bleeding money through shell vendor contracts for nearly 2 years. And Adrian realized something else. They never planned to frame him permanently. They planned to use him temporarily, long enough to survive an upcoming federal audit, long enough to create a scapegoat, long enough to protect themselves. A hard knock suddenly echoed through the apartment. Adrian froze. Another knock followed immediately. He moved cautiously toward the door and checked the peephole. Mia stood outside, soaked from the rain, breathing heavily while clutching her purse tightly against her chest. The moment he opened the door, she stepped inside quickly. I think they're watching me. Adrian shut the door behind her. What happened? She pushed wet hair away from her face and lowered her voice. After everyone left the conference room, Trevor locked himself inside Warren's office for almost an hour. Then IT started freezing employee access records. Adrian frowned. They're cleaning evidence. Yes. Mia pulled out a flash drive from her jacket pocket. I copied more before they locked everything down. He stared at the drive. You could lose your job. I know. And if this gets worse. I know. Her voice cracked slightly, but she forced herself to stay composed. The apartment fell quiet except for rainfall hitting the windows. Mia looked around the room for the first time. It was simple, modest. Nothing about it reflected the years Adrian spent helping generate millions for Blackridge. No luxury furniture. No expensive artwork. No signs of corporate success. Just survival. She noticed stacks of medical paperwork near the counter. Prescription receipts. Hospital statements. Utility notices. Reality. Her expression softened. They ruined your life today. Adrian looked back toward the glowing laptop screen. No, he said quietly. They revealed who they really are. Mia stepped closer. So what now? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened another encrypted company archive hidden deep inside an old operations backup system. Mia watched lines of data appear rapidly across the screen. Supplier histories. Private executive communications. Restricted financial transfers. Her eyes widened slowly. Adrian, these people aren't just corrupt. He opened another document. Her mouth fell slightly open. Dear God. The file contained illegal overseas routing payments disguised as emergency infrastructure expenses. Millions of dollars had vanished through fake logistics partnerships connected to executives inside Blackridge. Mia looked stunned. This could destroy the company. Adrian's face remained emotionless. No, he corrected calmly. The truth could destroy the company. Lightning flashed outside the apartment windows. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mia finally whispered the question sitting heavily between them. What are you going to do? Adrian leaned back slowly in his chair. And for the first time since his public humiliation, his mind became frighteningly clear. He remembered every executive meeting, every hidden conversation, every lie. He remembered Trevor mocking employees while quietly siphoning money from projects. He remembered Warren approving layoffs while collecting enormous bonuses. He remembered coworkers crying privately after being discarded by management like broken equipment. Blackridge destroyed people professionally, emotionally, financially, then hid behind motivational slogans and polished branding. The company deserved exposure. But Adrian knew something important. If he attacked directly, they would crush him legally before the truth surfaced. Blackridge had lawyers, political connections, public relations firms, money. No, if he wanted revenge, it had to be surgical, invisible, slow. He looked toward Mia. They built their empire on reputation, he said quietly. She nodded cautiously. So I'm not going after the building. Rain thundered harder against the windows. I'm going after trust. The next morning, Blackridge headquarters operated like nothing had happened. Employees entered with coffees and laptops. Elevator music echoed softly through marble corridors. Receptionists smiled professionally. Executives attended meetings beneath giant digital screens displaying growth projections and corporate achievements. But underneath the polished surface, tension quietly spread. People whispered. About Adrian. About the public firing. About how strange it all felt. Even employees who disliked him admitted something about the situation seemed wrong. Trevor noticed it immediately. He stood inside his glass office overlooking the operations floor while adjusting his cufflinks anxiously. Control the narrative. He snapped toward the marketing director seated nearby. Make it clear this was internal fraud. Isolate responsibility. The director nodded carefully. Yes, sir. Trevor loosened his tie slightly after she left. His confidence from yesterday had faded. Because Adrian had not reacted the way guilty people usually reacted. No begging. No panic. No emotional collapse. Just silence. And Trevor understood exactly why that terrified him. Adrian knew things. Things capable of bringing federal investigators straight through Blackridge's front doors. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Warren entered. You look nervous. Trevor forced a smile. Just managing fallout. Warren shut the office door behind him. Legal is handling the public side. Focus on internal stability. Trevor nodded. But Warren studied him carefully. You're certain Cole doesn't have access to anything dangerous? A brief pause. Too brief. Warren noticed immediately. Trevor. He built backup redundancies years ago. Trevor admitted reluctantly. But IT disabled his credentials. That's not what I asked. Trevor swallowed subtly. Warren's face darkened. You told me everything was contained. It should be. Should. The tension between them thickened instantly. Trevor quickly recovered. He won't risk it. Warren stepped closer. You clearly underestimated him already. Silence. Then Warren lowered his voice. If this explodes, you understand what happens to both of us. Trevor nodded stiffly. But after Warren left, Trevor immediately picked up his phone. Find out who Adrian Cole has contacted since yesterday. Meanwhile, several miles away, Adrian sat inside a small 24-hour diner near the edge of the city. The place was nearly empty except for a truck driver near the counter and an elderly couple sharing breakfast quietly beside the windows. Old blues music played softly overhead. The waitress refilled Adrian's coffee without asking. "You look like you haven't slept." "Didn't." She gave a sympathetic smile before walking away. Across from Adrian sat a man named Calvin Reese, mid-50s, former investigative journalist, disgraced years earlier after exposing procurement fraud tied to a pharmaceutical corporation. Adrian had met him once through an operations conference years before. Unlike most reporters, Calvin understood corporate corruption deeply enough to recognize how carefully companies buried evidence. He also hated corporations with personal intensity. Calvin reviewed several printed documents silently while chewing gum slowly. Finally, he looked up. "This is massive." Adrian remained calm. "It gets worse." "I believe you." Calvin leaned back in the booth. "You know what this means if it's real." "It's real." "No." Calvin corrected quietly. "I mean for you." The diner lights reflected across the rain-covered windows behind them. "These people will destroy you to protect themselves." Adrian's expression barely changed. "They already tried." Calvin studied him for several seconds, then nodded slowly. "Fair point." He organized the documents carefully into a folder. "I can't publish this immediately." "I know. I'll need verification. Multiple sources. Time. You'll have it." Calvin narrowed his eyes. "You sound very prepared." Adrian stirred his coffee slowly. "For years, I thought loyalty protected people. And now," he looked directly at Calvin, "now I understand leverage protects people." Outside the diner, the storm finally began fading. But somewhere far above the city skyline, dark clouds still hovered over Black Ridge. Invisible for now. Waiting. The following week became chaos inside the company. Small problems began appearing everywhere. Minor supplier delays. Missing inventory authorizations. Payment processing errors. Confidential emails anonymously leaked to industry competitors. Nothing catastrophic individually, but together, the disruptions spread anxiety through upper management. Trevor exploded during executive meetings. How does this keep happening? Nobody had answers. Because Adrian understood Blackridge's internal systems better than anyone alive. He knew where pressure points existed, which vendors would panic first, which clients depended on unstable logistics chains, which executives lied most frequently, and most importantly, which secrets terrified them most. Late one evening, Trevor remained alone inside his office reviewing damage reports when his computer screen suddenly flickered, then froze. A single message appeared. "You should have just fired me quietly." Trevor's face drained completely of color. He stood up instantly, looking around the empty office floor. Nobody. Only rows of silent desks beneath dim overhead lighting. Then another message appeared. "Now everyone pays." Trevor grabbed his phone with shaking hands. For the first time since framing Adrian, he genuinely felt afraid. That was the moment everything started falling apart. And trust me, it only got more intense from there. The next part is already waiting for you on the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.